viruses alive? Characteristics of life article. Paragraph 1. You have probably heard of viruses such as the common cold, Ebola, Zika, HIV, and the flu. Have you ever experienced a virus? Did you wonder why you felt so terrible or what has caused your symptoms? Paragraph 2. Let's travel back in time to the late 1800s when Dmitry Ivanovsky was given a critical task to solve the case of the tobacco crop disease. Farmers then were losing their valuable tobacco crops to a mystery plant disease that caused the leaves of the plant to wither and fall, and the plant eventually died. Ivanovsky decided to use a microscope to observe any germs that may have been present and extracted the plant juice of a diseased tobacco plant. He saw nothing out of the ordinary and was perplexed at his lack of findings. Dmitry then applied diseased extracted tobacco juice to healthy plants, and those plants contracted the same withering and dying symptoms as the diseased plants. He concluded that the disease-causing agents were so small that they could not be seen with a microscope. He was certain that some disease-causing agent was present. Paragraph 3. Later, in 1897, Dutch scientist Martinus Metternich hypothesized that mysterious tiny particles in the tobacco juice caused the tobacco crop disease. He named these particles viruses, after the Latin word viruluntus, meaning poisonous. Years later, in 1935, American biochemist Wendell Stanley isolated crystals of the newly named tobacco mosaic virus. He was puzzled because living things do not crystallize. Paragraph 4. Viruses are infective particles, and all viruses are made up of nucleic acid molecules such as DNA or RNA inside of a protective protein coat called capsid. Some viruses have a spiky envelope or a lipid membrane that covers the outside of their capsid. Viruses are very diverse, differing widely in size, shape, and structure. Most viruses are so small that they can only be seen with a very powerful electron microscope. Viruses are not classified in any of the 5 kingdoms of living things because they are not Monera, bacteria and archaea, fungi, protists, plants, or animals. Paragraph 5. So, are viruses alive or not? What do you think? First, let's examine the traits that all living things share and see if viruses also have those traits. In order for something to be considered a living thing, it must have all of the following characteristics of living things: cellular organization, composed of one or more cells; metabolism, obtain and use material and energy; homeostasis, maintain a stable internal environment; response to stimuli, respond to the environment; heredity, store and transmit genetic information or DNA; reproduction, produce new similar organisms through sexual or asexual reproduction; growth and development, increase the mass and complexity during an organism's life cycle; evolution, inherited change in the characteristics of species over several generations. Cellular organization, paragraph 6. All living things are made from one or more cells. Cells are the basic unit structures of all living things, and all cells contain a cell membrane, ribosomes, and DNA. Both unicellular and multicellular organisms show high levels of cell organization. Viruses are simple, singular particles that are made up of nucleic acid such as DNA or RNA that is encapsulated in a capsid. Some capsids have envelopes. Viruses do not have cells, cell organization, cell membranes, or other organelles that cells have. Here's an example of an animal cell. They've identified ribosomes, DNA, and the cell membrane. Metabolism, paragraph 7. All living things obtain and use material and energy in order to grow, develop, produce, reproduce, and perform all other life functions. Metabolism is the combination of chemical reactions through which organisms build up or break down materials to create energy. For example, chloroplasts in plant cells convert energy in sunlight to chemical energy, food, during photosynthesis. Mitochondria in plant and animal cells convert the chemical energy stored in food to power cell activities during cell respiration. Paragraph 8. Viruses are too small and too simple to collect and use their own energy. When viruses are outside of a cell, they do not use energy. Instead, they only become active when they are in contact with a host cell and steal the host cell's energy. Once the virus is activated or energized, it uses the host cell's energy and organelles to make more viruses. Because viruses do not use their own energy, some scientists do not consider them alive. This is an odd distinction, though, because obligate intracellular parasite bacteria rely on energy from their host, and yet they are considered alive and are classified under kingdom Monera. This is a chloroplast. This is a mitochondria. Homeostasis, paragraph 9. All organisms need to maintain homeostasis, a condition that occurs when organisms maintain a relatively stable internal environment. Even when external conditions dramatically change, your body undergoes millions of adjustments throughout the day to keep chemicals and internal conditions of your body stable. For example, when your body temperature rises, blood vessels dilate to release heat, and your sweat glands secrete fluid. When the fluid, sweat, evaporates off your skin, it takes heat energy with it and cools the body. On the contrary, when your body temperature falls, blood vessels constrict to maintain heat and muscles shiver to generate heat. These processes are known as thermoregulation. Here's an example of homeostasis thermoregulation. The body temperature rises, so the blood vessels dilate and sweat glands produce fluid that evaporates off the body and releases heat. Heat is lost into the environment. Then your body returns to normal temperature. This cycle continues. On the other side, if your body temperature falls, your blood vessels constrict to conserve heat, your sweat glands do not secrete fluid, your muscles contract and shiver to generate heat to warm your body. Heat is retained, and then your body returns to normal temperatures. Paragraph 10. Homeostasis is tendency of resisting change in order to maintain a stable, relatively constant internal environment. Viruses have no mechanisms to control their internal environment and therefore do not maintain their own homeostasis. Response to stimuli, paragraph 11. All living things detect and respond to stimuli from the environment. A stimulus is a signal that leads to an organism's response. For example, when it has been dark and it becomes suddenly bright, pupils in your eyes will contract to let in less light to aid your vision. On the contrary, when it has been bright and it is suddenly dark, your pupils will dilate to let in more light so that you can see better in the dark. Plants also respond to stimuli. Some plants release toxic chemicals in order to fend off the insects eating them. Paragraph 12. Viruses do not change their behaviors in response to sound, light, or touch, the way that bacteria, plants, or humans do. Some bacteria viruses can even lie quietly waiting for the conditions to be right in a cell before they actively infect it. Nevertheless, there has not been enough research done to definitively say that viruses do not respond to anything. Heredity, paragraph 13. All living things receive traits from their parent organism. Heredity is the passing on of genetic information from parents to offspring. All living things are based on the universal genetic code written in the nucleic acid molecule called DNA. DNA stores and transmits genetic information. This complex information is needed to live, grow, and reproduce. The genetic information stored in DNA is copied and passed from parent to offspring during reproduction. With very few variations, all living things' genetic code is almost identical to every other living thing's genetic code on Earth. For example, the chimpanzee and human genetic code is approximately 96% identical. Even a banana's DNA is 60% similar to a human's DNA. Viruses also contain genetic material in the form of DNA or RNA. When a virus hacks a cell, it tricks the cell into making new viruses. The new viruses contain genetic material from the parent virus. Reproduction, paragraph 14. All living things pass down their genetic material through reproduction. Reproduction is the process of producing similar organisms. Most animals and plants undergo sexual reproduction, when gametes, sex cells, from two different parents combine to form the first cell of a new organism with similar yet unique genetic traits. Bacteria, hydra, and yeast reproduce during asexual reproduction. During asexual reproduction, a single organism produces offspring genetically identical to itself with identical characteristics and traits. Paragraph 15. Viruses can only reproduce by infecting living cells. In order to infect a living cell, a virus must find its way inside by binding its proteins on its surface membrane to the receptor proteins on the cell. These proteins trick the cell to take in the virus or the virus's genetic material. Once inside the cell, a virus will use its genetic information to make multiple copies of itself. The new virus caused the cell to burst, releasing the new viruses to infect other cells. Some viruses replicate immediately, while others initially stay in an inactive state within the host. A single virus can reproduce in the cell, creating new identical viruses, or two viruses can reproduce in a cell, producing a new virus with traits from each virus. Additionally, if a mistake happens during reproduction of a viral genetic material, a mutation can occur, creating a new virus with different genetic material. Here's an example of viral reproduction. Virus reproduces by injecting the material into the cell, and then the cell is used to replicate the virus. The cell eventually lyses or breaks out, and the cell now goes into affect other cells. Growth and development, paragraph 16. Every different species of living things has a particular pattern of growth and development coded by their genes. Growth and development may seem like very similar terms, but they are actually quite different. Growth simply refers to the increase of size and mass over a period of time, and it occurs through a cell division process known as mitosis. During mitosis, one cell splits into two duplicate cells, adding mass to the body. This process allows all body parts to grow the size appropriate for the individual. Development is a broader term for the transformation or changes in an organism that increases its complexity throughout its life cycle. For example, a moth has several developmental steps during its life cycle, such as egg, larva, cocoon, and adult moth. Viruses use host cells by manipulating them into building new viruses. Each individual virus is created in its fully formed state and will neither grow in size or develop within its existence. Evolution, paragraph 17. Over many generations, populations of species slowly evolve or change over time. Evolution is highly driven by random mutations or mistakes made during genetic material replication in cells. These mutations may make a population of organisms more likely to survive and reproduce in their environment. Evidence of evolutionary change links all forms of life to a common origin over 3.5 billion years ago. Evidence of this change is written in all aspects of living and fossilized organisms and include physical features and structures of proteins, and DNA sequences of genetic material or genetic information. Human evolution has taken place over the last 6 million years or so. Here is a phylogenetic tree, the domains and the kingdoms. So kingdom Animalia, kingdom Fungi, kingdom Plantae, kingdom Protist, kingdom Archaea, kingdom Bacteria. These 4 kingdoms are under the domain of Eukarya. This kingdom is domain Archaea. This kingdom is domain Bacteria, and all of these are under the origin of life, our common ancestor. Paragraph 18. Viruses undergo evolution similar to living things. However, they evolve very rapidly. Viruses can swap genetic material or undergo mutation to create new variations of the virus. The larger population of the rapid life cell cycle of viruses allows for the evolution of viruses to happen so quickly. The larger the population, the higher the odds that it will have a virus with a particularly random mutation. These mutations lead to a faster change in that type of virus over time. The virus's rapid lifespan also increases its evolutionary speed. For instance, an HIV virus goes through its lifespan in 52 hours, whereas a human completes a lifespan in approximately 79 years and is only able to reproduce and pass on genetic material for a small percentage of time. Conclusion, paragraph 19. Scientists today are still mystified as to whether viruses are alive or not. When scientists apply the list of criteria to determine if a virus is alive, the answer remains uncertain. The debate of whether viruses are living or non-living continues today. As new research and understanding of viruses develops over time, scientists may eventually reach a final decision on this question.